Hey, thanks, Alan. Happy Friday, everyone. As Alan I'm with LG Ads. If folks have not heard about LG Ads, it's because we were previously known as Alfonso, but LG made an investment with us, and now as LG Ads, we give advertisers a single, direct, and exclusive uh, source of audience data as well as addressable inventory across 120 million households worldwide. But with that, welcome, Matt. Thank you very much. We're very excited to have you today. As Alan mentioned, Matt is actually the director of media sponsorship and digital marketing. That's quite a mouthful, and I'm sure, Matt, you have a lot of responsibilities, but would like to hear, from your own mouth, like what your day to day looks like, what comes under your overall purview.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ashish, and really glad to be here. Hey, everybody. Yeah, makes for really busy days. Like, unfortunately for me, I haven't really been able to spend much time sitting in on the sessions over the last few days because we're starting to plan for next year already. I think Katie just mentioned that we have the new fronts coming up next week, and the new fronts next week, and then the upfront shortly after that. So we're doing some preliminary planning already, and so that's taking up quite a bit of our day to day. But yeah, we're really excited about the media landscape and what's coming, and can't wait to be a part of that. But yeah, sponsorships. We certainly have our sponsorship with the NBA, a number of other partnerships that we have. And so day to day is doing our best to make sure that we're deriving the most value out of those opportunities. In digital marketing, yeah, it's pretty broad. There's a lot that's happening in that space right now, and State Farm is very active there. So makes for some really busy days, Ashish.
Hey, thanks again for taking the time out of the details. So you mentioned upfronts there in your introduction. So let me start with a question right there, which is tell us, how you're thinking about media planning with upfronts coming up, given the current climate and given, where we came off of, right? Which is from last year, which was a challenging situations with upfronts and commitments and all that happened last year. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, 2020 it was obviously challenging for a variety of reasons. So for us and like many other brands, we just had to adapt to make sure that we're meeting customer needs, as well as the changing media consumption habits, right? So you have more and more
Mhm.
people that were adopting digital faster, and that adoption wasn't limited to a certain age range. It was happening across the board. But fortunately for us, going into the year, we had planned to build the most flexible plan possible. So we knew there were going to be some nascent spaces that we wanted to explore.
Mhm.
And so we wanted to make sure that we had the flexibility in the plan in order for us to be able to test and learn. So fortunately for us, last year, just our various creative agencies and media agencies and partners were just very accommodating as we were trying to navigate those challenges. So I think a common theme, and I just heard Katie say this, and this is true for us, something that will continue as we plan for next year, will be maintaining that level of flexibility going into our media planning cycle.
Got it. So flexibility and change key over there, right?
Absolutely.
Continuing totally. You also mentioned, right, like I guess streaming video and audio, right? Like you said, with changing behavior, that's what we've seen. They've become very hot topics, and probably rightly so, right? Given just the consumer adoption of those mediums. So how's State Farm thinking about those mediums as part of the broader mix that you have when it comes to your overall planning?
Yeah, Ashish, we're with you, man. Streaming video and audio have exploded over the
Mhm.
last 12 months. And we're really, frankly, really excited to see the innovation that's happening in those spaces. I think that gives us some license to think about how we do things differently. And we've tested some things with some various partners there that we're looking to build on as we think about the coming year. But we also know that there are just a growing number of people that are only using streaming services to for content, right? So this gives us an opportunity to reach consumers differently, not just through traditional linear television anymore, just a variety of options that are available to us. So yeah, we want to continue to build on the streaming partnerships that we already have, both in video and audio. The thing for us though is, as we think about planning, and we were just talking about this recently, deciding the investment mix across all of those different partners can be a challenge, right? Because there are just so many options that consumers have. So where do you start to place your bets, both from a test and learn perspective, but in terms of the outcomes that you are trying to derive in order to drive the business. So trying to balance that can be tricky, and so there's quite a bit of analysis that happens between us and OMD, who's our media agency, to make sure that we're placing the right bets there. And so in order to do that, obviously we're closely monitoring streaming performance, but also just trends overall. And I think those two things combined will certainly help inform what we do next year.
Awesome. Cool. We spoke about the opportunity, which is what's growing, and streaming video and audio are growing. I'm going to flip the next question here, which is, there positive changes, opportunities, but then there's also changes happening which pose a challenge. And I'm referring to, the changes coming with IDFA being made by iOS. And for folks who don't know what that is, basically going forward, what iOS is doing is consumers will have to give explicit permission uh, to use the IDFA for getting personalized ads, right? And folks see this as a massive change because consumers, when they explicitly asked, very few consumers are going to opt in. So with those changes, right, with that challenge, how does that impact your mobile ad strategy in general?
Yeah, Ashish, this is probably the hottest topic in marketing right now. It's certainly in all the trades, and definitely something that we're thinking about here, and I'm sure a lot of other brands are also. So we know that these privacy changes are going to have a significant impact. We know that mobile audience sizes are going to decrease, so there are going to be fewer conversions that are going to be able to be measured. And we know that those two variables put quite a bit of pressure on our overall mobile ROI. So the impacts of those changes, I think, are still being assessed. I think some early reads seem to suggest that a sizable portion of folks are starting to opt out. And we'll continue to monitor that over time, as everyone else will. But those changes are going to be felt by our media partners certainly, but as well as third-party measurement solution providers, and we think that that's going to happen for some time.
Mhm.
Now, Ashish, all of that said, we do still think that paid social presents a significant opportunity for brands, namely for us, especially when you consider Apple's footprint. It's just so massive. So we expect to continue making investments in social. Those investments just could look a little different than they did this year.
Got it. Interesting. Um, I guess another very different kind of question that has come up is, I've been very, uh, insurance industry ads and the creators are really very catchy, um, right? And some of my favorites. So talk a little bit about, how you adapt your messaging, the creatives themselves with the changing time and the environment. And I guess lastly, which one is your most favorite as well? But would love to
Oh,
hear.
favorite. Okay, so you're gonna ask my favorite too. Okay, and that was actually gonna be easy for me. Yeah, characters are used all the time in advertising. So in our category is no different. I don't know that we have any folks that are in our category right now, or any brands rather in our category right now that aren't using some sort of character. But we think that we've done something special by introducing an updated version of Jake from State Farm. So Jake is certainly one of our key distinct brand assets, and we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put him in environments that allow him to engage consumers in creative ways. So you asked about my favorite. Actually, the example that I was thinking about was the Super Bowl. I was fortunate enough to be part of the team that worked on our Super Bowl ad this year. So this was the first time that we ever did a Super Bowl ad, and so we actually casted Drake as Jake stand-in, right? So that allowed us to really surprise and entertain people in a way that elevated the perception of Jake as
Mhm.
well as our brand. And so you can't really talk about that ad without talking about Jake from State Farm and then ultimately about State Farm. And so just really finding creative ways to lean into what makes your brand unique and kind of weaving those things into your storytelling, we think is critical. And using a platform like the Super Bowl to be able to do that has been really big for us. The question that we often get is whether this is something that we think we might do again. I don't know that we've decided that yet, but I can tell you from the results that we've seen, we're really excited about the outcomes from doing that.
Amazing, amazing. No, I'll definitely love that ad. um, a question for you, right? Which is there is just so much data that we have now, right? There's so many choices in terms of which medium do you use. There's so many choices in terms of how do you measure, what KPI is right? What's the right methodology of looking at your ROI? So my question to you is, as a marketer, has it become more easier or more difficult, right?
Um,
Like, are there more questions asked from the organization of you, versus maybe 20 years back it was, hey, this thing, right? So I'm very curious to hear about, how you see today's world relative to what was there in the past, and especially given you've been in the industry for such a long time.
yeah, and that's a really tricky question. Like for example, marketing attribution, right? Used to be the holy grail. And now there are just so many attribution solutions that are out there. And then you have these iOS and frankly, these coming Android changes related to privacy, where we know that attribution is going to take another hit. So I think on the whole, Ashish, at least for us, measurement is easier.
Mhm.
That said, just given the variety of measurement options and just the volatility in the measurement environment overall, it's just going to be important for marketers to be clear about the KPIs that matter most to their business. And so, just finding that consistent north star to make things just. I just think that if you have that consistent north star, it just makes it easier for you to kind of navigate those changes as they occur. I think where it's maybe easier to get tripped up is if you're not really focused on the business outcomes that you're trying to achieve, and then trying to find the data sources and the ways to deploy those data sources in a way in a way that complements those outcomes. I think that's where people and brands tend to get tripped up a little bit. We try to be really intentional about the business outcomes that we're trying to achieve. We know that the data sources are going to come and go, whether they're internal data sources or external data sources. But being able to make sure that regardless of the data inputs that come in, that we're stacking those up relative to the business outcomes that we're trying to achieve. I think as long as we're able to do those things, I think it puts us in a better position to be able to leverage data in a way that's more meaningful.
No, that's really interesting. By the way, for folks who want to ask questions, please go ahead. We'll be starting our Q&A in a couple of minutes. Um, Matt, going back to, you referred to about the KPIs you look at, and um, at LG Ads, we often, when we pitch, we say, hey, you know, reach versus outcomes. You don't have to choose between both. But tell me a little bit about how do you do the balancing act, right, between the, what KPIs to look at, right, for a given campaign, because there's just so many KPIs to look at, or how do you kind of navigate that whole question about what is a successful way to measure yourself?
Yeah, yeah. You mentioned reach versus outcomes, and Reach is certainly important to us, right? If you, and I mentioned this earlier, right? The category that we're in is extremely competitive. I want to say we're either second or third in terms of advertising spend by overall category, and so it makes for a pretty intense environment. So reach is certainly something that we're wanting to make sure that we're keeping a close eye on. I think some of the more traditional measures like awareness and consideration are certainly things that we monitor. But we're also trying to make sure that we're paying close attention to engagement markers, right? And trying to understand not only are we in the right places for our brand, but we also in the places where we believe that consumers are going to engage and stick, right? Because I mentioned this earlier. Consumers have so many options in terms of where they
Mhm,
can go for content, and so we want to make sure that not only are we thinking about the places that have maybe greater reach, but we also want to make sure that we're going to places that have staying power. And so, if you look at some of the investments that we've made, particularly over the last couple of years, I think without divulging too much, I think that maybe you can see maybe a pattern starting to develop in terms
mhm.
of where and how we're making those investments, and frankly, how we're showing up in the marketplace relative to those investments.
Got it. No, thank you. I'm going to start the Q&A session,
Yeah,
right?
do it.
We have a question which is, I guess, more about team building. How can marketing and technology leaders structure their teams and recruit highly coveted talent for a new era that demands an increasing array of skill sets? So, Matt, any insights that you can provide will be great here.
Yeah, so it sounds like that's more of a recruiting type question, right? In terms
Yeah.
of acquiring talent. Okay. So I know for us, we have a bit of a blend here at State Farm. So we certainly have our digital marketing teams here, but then we also have what we call an ET. I think industry wide would be an IT infrastructure that kind of enables a lot of the capabilities that we have. And really focuses on making sure that those consumer experiences are where they need to be. So I'll just speak to kind of our side of the house. So for us, we want to make sure that we're focusing on acquiring talent that really understands data, right? So we talked about this just a moment ago,
Mhm,
Ashish, just how important data is in terms of kind of understanding the overall landscape and using some of those insights to help inform your decision making. So having that kind of that bent towards data is something that's important. We're building out our capabilities and making enhancements relative to our capabilities. So making sure that we can acquire talent that can also help us understand how to deploy the creative that we're developing and doing so in ways that are going to be engaging and timely.
mhm.
Those are some of the other qualities that we look for. In terms of our overall recruiting strategy, I can't really get into a lot of detail there.
Fair enough.
But in terms of some of the traits that we look for in
Mhm,
candidates, and people that we want to help build out and round out what we're doing here at State Farm, having that bent towards data and really having that solid understanding of the different capabilities, and how we can leverage those capabilities, I would say those two things would be tops on our list.
No, that's definitely the trend, right? Which is everyone needs to understand data, right? That's at the heart of all decision making. There's a
Absolutely.
question here, which is how are you determining where to spend time on emerging technologies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, and it's tough, right? And I want to make sure I'm answering the question. So, if we're talking about emerging technologies, in terms of things like Clubhouse, right? Are we talking about that, or are we talking about tools? Because I
I,
think those
I
are
would
two.
I would I would just use that question as both, I think, tools as well as emerging in terms of mediums as well, in terms
Okay.
of how you advertise, right? Like
Yeah.
new opportunities where one can advertise?
Yeah. So let me start with mediums. So lots of new mediums popping up.
Yep.
Clubhouse was the new thing until, well, Quibi is probably a better example. I think Quibi was the new thing until it wasn't. Clubhouse, I think the jury's still out on things like Clubhouse.
Yep.
You have to be really intentional about how you make those decisions. For us, we do quite a bit of vetting, and so I mentioned that OMD is our media partner, and they're great about kind of digging into to really what's under the hood when it comes to some of those new platforms that are popping up. But I guess the thing I would say is that is at least as we're thinking about a platform, it has to be a platform that is that best serves the business needs that we have in ways that we want to engage with consumers. And not every platform is designed for that. There are going to be some platforms that are better suited for that than others. And so we just have to be just very mindful of what those platforms are. Fortunately for us, OMD as a partner has been with us for a while and has a really good sense for our tolerance levels when it comes to the types of platforms that we want to be on. Brand safety is certainly something that's top of mind for us. So if you think about a platform like Clubhouse, that right now is still trying to get their arms around how they manage brand safety as a platform. Don't know how much you're gonna see and hear and feel State Farm in the Clubhouse environment, right? But that doesn't mean that there aren't other platforms that we're exploring that are maybe a little bit more nascent, that maybe you don't quite expect us to be there. But given the way that we're thinking about our brand and contemporizing ourselves and doing things differently, maybe you will. So I think from a platform standpoint, that's how I'd answer that question. In terms of capabilities, we're always trying to be mindful of the capabilities that we already have and the capabilities that are out there that can help supplement where we are and maybe bridge the gap from where we are to where we need to be. I think maybe answering that question might divulge a little more than we would like, but I can tell you that in terms of not only modernizing our brand, but modernizing our digital capabilities, we are definitely looking at a variety of platforms to make sure that we are showing up to consumers in a way that makes it easy for them to interact with us and allows for them to do so on their terms. So we're definitely thinking about platforms. We're definitely thinking about capabilities. And those are just some of the elements that we consider as we're doing that. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, I think, no, that was quite comprehensive. You covered both from a medium as well as from a tooling perspective. So really appreciate that, Matt. Um, there's a question here, which is, what is State Farm thinking in terms of, I guess, the theme of or the purpose in its marketing effort, right? What's the theme that, and you could think about it as going forward as well as, in general, what's the theme that State Farm tries to communicate to consumers, right? Is it about trust? Is it about, what are the primary themes that you tend to focus your marketing efforts on?
Yeah, there are two that come to mind for me, Ashish. There, so the first would be just kind of the overall cultural DNA that represents State Farm, and that's the idea of being a good neighbor, right? It's as corny as it might sound to some, that is foundational to who we are. If you look at the makeup of the people in our company, if you look at what we've done in our communities, if you look at our agency force and what they do in their respective communities, I think it's hard to argue how much the being a good neighbor actually means to us. And so as you think about different themes and how we show up in the marketplace, they are largely around what we can do to make sure that we are helping people. We're in the insurance business. We make a variety of promises every day to millions of people to make sure that we're taking care of them in their time of need. And that's a primary focus for us. And so we want to do that in ways that are authentic and real. And so we want to make sure that as we're showing up in the marketplace, that the way that we do so is consistent with those values that we have. So that would be the first thing I would say. I would say in terms of our go-to-market approach, at least here recently, we focused a little bit more on price. So there are some long-standing misconceptions about State Farm and how price competitive we are. We're actually more price competitive than you might think. But in a lot of ways, our research seems to suggest that many people view us as an aspirational brand, which is certainly high praise, and we're flattered by that. But we also know that can scare some folks off when it comes to maybe taking a look at us from an insurance standpoint. And so we want to make sure that people understand that we are indeed price competitive. And so we have our surprisingly great rates campaign that we've launched within the last 12 months that you're going to continue to see us lean into over the coming months. Because we have I think a bit of a barrier to overcome when it comes to people's perception of how price competitive State Farm really is. Uh-oh, guys, did I lose you or did you lose me?
I'm having some connectivity issues.
Okay.
I don't
All right,
know
let's
if you
check.
can hear me.
Alan, is it me or is it?
No, it's not you, Ashish.
Okay.
He said he's having some kind of. We can hear you, Ashish. Oh, now you're back.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, no, the connectivity dropped off. Sorry, guys. Apologies for that.
Oh, no worries. I just want to make sure it wasn't me.
No, yeah,
Technology.
Technology, I know.
Yes.
All right.
Well, anyway, guys, thank you so much for that. It's just really that's fascinating because from my POV, State Farm and insurance, is sort of such an iconic brand. The insurance industry in general is always cited when people say who uses data in the TV industry. It's like, financial companies, insurance companies. So it was really interesting to sort of hear what you guys are up to and how that's all going on. So thank you so much for that. And now we're going to move on. We actually have, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Take care.